Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure as director of the Robert Schuman Centre to welcome you this morning to a one-day workshop on shaking the brick and mortar. In my language, that's the bricks and mortar, moving higher education online. Firstly, can I begin by thanking the co-organisers of the workshop, Annika Zorn from Academic Services and Jean-Michel Glachant, Director of the Florence School of Regulation. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. And they have, both of them have pioneered e-learning within this institution. So not only would this workshop not have happened without them, but in fact, e-learning itself, they've both pioneered it in the Florence School of Regulation over the last number of years. And of course, all major changes in technology of communication have an impact on society and education. In the pre-university times, those monks writing on parchment with their cane and reed and in the end metal pens were working to transmit the existing knowledge and the wonderful books that existed. And the printing press, of course, then was truly transformational in the reach of both in the reach of the printed press, but also, of course, in terms of information and learning. And it was ever thus. This is just one more important development in a long, long history of communications revolutions. And I've no doubt that this one already has had a major impact on how students learn and how knowledge is imparted. Universities are pretty robust institutions. They began in the High Middle Ages and have, if we look at the institutions that have lasted through those centuries, then universities have been among the most adaptable institutions that the world has seen. Not only adaptable across time, but of course the idea of a university has spread right across the world. So I have no doubt that universities, the bricks and mortar, or the idea of a university, and my last university was Newman's University, who wrote that wonderful book, The Idea of a University. I've no doubt that the idea of university, both bricks and mortar and online and technological reach, will change over time. I think for all of us who are in education, we also must ensure that we never lose what education is about. I worry a little when I look at universities today, the extent to which the word teaching has replaced education, the extent to which you have almost the way in which courses are designed and what expectations of how students learn and what they should learn have a sameness about them that we should, I think, always retain at least a question about. Because in the end, what matters in education is getting those students hooked, switching on a light, getting them excited about what they're learning and what they want to learn, and giving them the skills to learn for themselves. And I worry a little in the way in which we're approaching education today, that I can open and look at course design across many countries and they look the same. And I think we should always at least retain a question about how we educate, and always remember that it is getting the students hooked, getting them excited about learning, about being involved in this wonderful world of learning, discovery and knowledge. Already the internet and computational capacity has been transformational in our universities. We've seen MOOCs and e-learning, blended learning, Moodle and Blackboard, and we've all used them. And change in universities comes in two ways. It comes from the bottom up when individual lecturers decide that something is new and different and they'll experiment with it. They talk to colleagues about it, colleagues will adapt it. And that organic development within universities has always happened and is extremely important. But of course, universities are also corporate institutions. And probably what is missing in many universities at the moment is not the extended experimentation among academics, particularly younger academics, in terms of using technology and the potential of e-learning, but the universities themselves at the corporate level, where they tend not to have any sort of coherent digital strategy. Some do, but many don't. But change within the university will always be both. It will always be organic from the bottom up, but university management must also be attentive to whether or not they provide an encouraging and enabling and flourishing environment within which these new technologies can be used. So again, I will end by saying how delighted I am that we are doing this today, that it is a cooperation with academic services, and I will hopefully be here for some of the debate because although my teaching, my time in the classroom is over now, I still remain at heart an educationalist. It's one of the things that I think, again, those of us who are university lecturers should never forget just how privileged it is to have a role that allows us leave our traces, however scarce and scant, on thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals over a lifetime. So again, thank you, and thank both of the conference organisers for all of the work and all of the backup team who designed and will now deliver this workshop. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brigid, very much for this introduction, and I do share, indeed, a lot of your thinking. I would like to welcome everybody here today. I think we are extremely happy to have gathered so many experts online here today at the European University Institute. And I think what is particular about the workshop today is that we all have in common that we are interested in online, but we approach online from very different perspectives. So I do think that this workshop might provide some interesting insight and some learning opportunities for all of us, so we can get something with us to feed into future discussions on the topic. So why to talk about online? And Brigid has already mentioned this. So as higher education institutions have always been able to adapt from the Middle Ages to today, but I do think if we're talking about online, we cannot avoid talking about what is the role of universities. And I don't think it's by chance that at the moment there's an EU-funded project, which is the Auckland Declaration, which discusses the purpose of the university in the 21st century. There's a lot of pressures currently put by governments, by the society on universities, and I think it's very important that we have a clear idea what the role of higher education is and our role within higher education institutions. And if I cherry pick just two of the principles which are mentioned in this Auckland Declaration, who's trying to define a new social contract for higher education in society, they say higher education is about the public good. So it is making higher education available to everybody. So whether that's low income or whether that's lifelong learners, it shouldn't only be for an elite, but it should be high quality knowledge, making it accessible to anybody. And the other principle I wanted to cherry pick here is the social responsibility. So what we are doing in higher education should have an impact, should improve the welfare. It should be about education. It should be about the general welfare. So what we are doing is can't stay only within universities, but there is a communication with the outside world. If I would have to add a principle to that, I would add that higher education is also about public discourse. It is about enhancing the quality of public discourses. It's about informing those engaged in public discourses better, and it's also disrupting our thinking. It's about discussing what do we understand about welfare. So we are the critical conscience, of course, of society in higher education, and we are teaching or educating young people to be that. If I would have to put it in a nutshell what higher education is about, and I think there it gathers what we all are interested in. I think it's about the creation and the sharing of high quality knowledge. And this can mean with students, with experts, with the wider society, within the academic community. That's Amy joining us from London for the first session. Okay. If I would have to give you a map of how I understand all of us, to give us a place of all of us here today, I would say the two poles of knowledge creation and sharing, I would define it in the following way. There is something we have been doing a lot. When it was about research, we have been disseminating. So we have been pushing out our knowledge out there, unidirectional communicating. But then it's also the question, how do we really use knowledge to make us think and act differently, to transform our thinking and transform the way we are engaging with the world? And there it's about deep learning, so to make people think and act differently. And I do think perhaps what comprehensively brings these two things together is about how do we communicate the new knowledge we are creating. So how do we engage with students, how do we engage with experts, how do we engage with other academics, and how do we engage with the wider society? And a little bit as a provocation, I do think that MOOCs, which have often been defined as a learning for students, as a solution, I think they are rather on the North Pole here. They are rather a dissemination. They are very good to promote, to give institutional visibility, but they are not so much about learning. So the question really is, how do we get knowledge across to think and act differently? We, as academics, within the higher education, and also the others. So it's a loop, or the European Commission would talk about the knowledge circulation. Moving higher education online. So how can moving higher education online help us making this better? I do think we have, of course, to think about whether online, is it complementary to our traditional academic activities, our teaching or education, research, publishing? Is it complementary, or is it transforming our activities, or is it perhaps even replacing some of the ways we have been doing things in higher education? I think if online does one thing, or has shown to do one thing very good, is that it has helped us already to rethink some of our activities we have been doing traditionally. So for example, in the teaching or in education, if you are seen potentially by hundreds of people in a video lecture, you think about the quality of your lecture. And it has started to even question the role of lectures for learning, whether they are useful within the classroom. So there is a discussion starting, thanks to online, about how we want to transmit knowledge and whether lecture is the best way of doing so. It also is about research. We now have the possibility to collaborate online worldwide, and I do think that Alvin and Helen, they can show us very good ways how we can collaborate across institutions, across borders, through online, with the help of online. And it's also, if we look at publishing online, it's also about what do we value as a publication? What does have an impact? So also there's a lot of discussion going on whether the impact factor or is the only, in peer-reviewed journals, is the only measure we have to take into consideration, or whether there's other things we need to take into consideration. And I think online has started all of these discussions, and they are very useful to have these discussions. So why this event today? It's some years since Twitter has emerged, 2007. It is some years that the New York Times has called 2012 the year of the MOOC. And it's some time since the European Commission has sent out its recommendation to the member states to use open access to make publicly funded research accessible to everybody. What has happened since? A lot has happened since. And we are going to discuss what has happened. And I do think that these three things, that Twitter and MOOC and open access, nicely define cornerstones of today's discussion, because they have something to do with today's discussion, and we will see this throughout the day. What will we look at today? I do think that indeed we are a kaleidoscope of different experience today gathered here in this room on online in the academy. So in the session 1, we will look at the use of social media and the use of Twitter for academics, because Twitter is not only about dissemination. It is an incredible tool which can be used for all types of academic activities, whether it's for research, whether it's for publishing, for dissemination, for engaging, for teaching, for educating. So it's an incredible, powerful tool, and we want to look at that, and also to see how other players within the knowledge society, a think tank and a media, a newspaper, are engaging with Twitter and are using it. In the second session, we will look at online learning and knowledge loops or knowledge circulation to see how can online enhance all of this online learning and education in universities, and whether it can help us to educate more people or educate people in a better way. And the session 3 is then, okay, so there has been written and said a lot about online, but in the end, you have to make it work. And there, as Brigid already mentioned, is it a top-down or is it a bottom-up? I'm sure that Jeff will give us a bird's perspective on what incentives the European Commission or national governments can provide, what awareness they can raise, but in the end, whether it has to come from the bottom-up or the level of the institution. So I think we are struggling across a lot of institutions, we are struggling with the same difficulties, and to discuss this here, I think will be extremely useful. I would like, if you have your smartphone or your computer or anything, and you could insert this address, I would like you to ask you what you would like to gain from today's workshop and share that with us. So I leave that there a second. So that's what you're all saying, what you hope to get out of today's learning from multiple perspectives, learn about online new ways, ideas, connections, rich conversation, new ideas for enhancing student learning, I guess. we did cut it at 40 characters. Get into problems and how to address new approaches to learning tasks, share experience, transforming learning, sharing experience and knowledge, diverse insights, ideas in the middle. So that's what you're hoping to get out. I will put that up later on again. Also, to invite you, you don't want to say it out loud here in the room. That is here behind closed doors, tweeted. So we have set up a Twitter feed if you want to share. Of course, this is also one advantage of online. There's only 2 people or 1 person who can speak or 2 people who can exchange with the others. We are a lot of people in the room, so it is Twitter allows us to have a parallel discussion going on if somebody absolutely wants to comment but doesn't want to interrupt the discussion. So please tweet it, and we will from time to time then put the Twitter feed here on the screen for the others to share.